All right, we are back. So this is round two for us. Drew Brucker and Rory Flynn. We're here to talk about what else other than AI image generation, or as Rory likes to put it, robot art. And yeah, man, there's a lot to dig into today. So I'm excited to get this going. And you and I had the pleasure of actually meeting in person last week
Yes, sir.
in New York, which was awesome, man. So me and Rory obviously have met online through LinkedIn, and we talk offline here, but like to meet in person and have the hospitality that we had. He took us out to some awesome little bar and restaurants out in New York, so that was fantastic, man. Thanks for having me. And
Of course.
what do you think about today, man? Let's jump into this thing, huh?
No, this is cool. This has been we had a good convo over some beer and pizza in New York. Of course, what else are you supposed to do when you're here, right? But this was you brought me onto the custom styles that day because I'd been dug in on some other project, and you're like, "Did you see this new tune feature?" I'm like, oh, "God, no! What is this now? Am I going to go home and spend 10 hours on it that night?" I was like, I'll give myself 2 days or so to figure, to see what's happening here. And then as soon as I went home, of course, I'm just like, like a kid on Christmas. Like, let me try this thing out. And then bang, it's like, okay, now I'm obsessed again. Damn it, Midjourney,
Well,
did it again.
You and I always joke because it always happens at like the most inconvenient time, the drop,
Always.
right? And it's so stealth mode in terms of when it happens. You have a general idea. They don't give you an exact time. They don't give you an exact date, right? And so for me, it felt like me this time. Like I was the one traveling. I was in New York. I had like other things that I was planning to do, so I didn't get a chance to dive into it as deeply as I wanted to when it launched. But since then, right, like, man, there's a lot going on there. So anybody that's joined us today, we are going to dive into tuning really, really deeply. We're also going to talk about some of the current updates that are happening with Midjourney, which we've got some quick notes we're going to breeze through there. We're going to answer any other questions that you guys have along the way too. So make sure you put any questions in the comments in the chat, and we'll make sure to get to those. We've got a full hour this time because we didn't have any technical difficulties
Yet.
Yeah.
We're still good.
So yeah, man, let's jump in, right? Like let's
do it.
jump in. I'm just gonna breeze through some of the updates really quickly here, and then we can touch on those in more detail later. But Midjourney had an office hours yesterday. For those of you who don't know, that's where they basically get together on a weekly basis. They give the community any updates that they can. There's some transparency and context there. Usually, it's not too detailed, but enough to whet your appetite, if you will.
Always.
So here are the notes that we have. So V5.3, we've heard about this for a while, right? It's going to happen. Is there going to be this jump just to 6? Turns out V5.3 is happening. According to Midjourney, they're 80 to 90% of the way there. They're thinking this could drop as early as next week, and I would imagine that to be the case. What's going to happen in 5.3? Not really sure. Not a lot of details there, but they did say it's going to be a similar jump than that of 5 to V5.1. So there were some slight differences there. There was a coherency boost there, which I think is also going to take place here. How impactful or significant is that? Not sure. And then the real big news here, right, is V6. Everybody wants to know when V6 is launching. What is it? When is it launching? Yada, yada, yada. Well, according to Midjourney, most of their teams currently working on V6. The test versions of V6 are actually rendering text as well. So that's super interesting, right? Because we've seen sort of DALL-E start to be a little bit more coherent and consistent with text. Midjourney, that's one of the areas that they've struggled. And then they're expecting a bigger jump in V6 than that from V4 to V5, which was massive, right? I mean, V4 was sort of that first part where you're like starting to get some representation of what you're actually prompting, and V5 was just almost super crisp on some of those things. And so massive things that are happening there. Rory, any initial thoughts before we jump into tuning?
I'm just, I'm excited for it just because I want to see how far they can push it. I can't believe this is only like really, I don't know, 18, 20 months in, wherever we're at this point, from V1 to V5. I mean, it's like nightmare fuel on V1 to like, you can actually get away with almost a, real quality photo. So yeah, I'm amped about this. And I think the couple, probably like a month or two ago, they had in their own shadow organization style, how they do everything, which is like release everything under the cloak of darkness. They said that this stylization feature, this personalized style, was going to be part of V6, and a big part of it, and that the community was kind of divided. They were not really sure how this would function, how it would work out. Realistically, they wanted to have, something in there for newer users to really be able to hone their style without having to go through all the technical prompt elements. So I think that's, it was a good release for them in this sense to get that out there, because it's kind of like dual purpose, right? Like it helps newer users prompt better and get more dynamic imagery without having to go and learn all the things that we've spent hours doing. Then the other side for, people that are using this on a daily basis and really into it, like it just gives us more dynamic opportunity and a better opportunity to be consistent. So it's a really good transition, I think, from V5 to V6, this piece right here, because speaking from a personal standpoint, I wrote a post about this the other day. I thought Midjourney was getting a little stale. It was becoming too predictable. Everything looked the same. The coherence was going down. So I was like, is there some competition on the rise? I mean, there's obviously other image generators. We've all talked about it. But now this feature has brought me back in. I've spent more time on the platform this go round and this last week than I have in 3 months. So, I mean, obviously it excited the user base. You go on Twitter, you go on YouTube, you go on LinkedIn, you'll see how many people are starting to use this thing. So it's a powerful feature. And that's why I think we gotta talk about it, because it's not as clear cut as it looks. It's not as easy as it sounds, because it's billed as something for beginners. But really, I think if you understand the tool and understand the functionality, it's going to be much more powerful for you. So that was my little soliloquy on what's going on.
I think that's a perfect representation of how to put it, because it really, like, the concept of tuning, style tuning, is very easy to understand, I think, for most of us, right? Like it's the idea that you can have some control and consistency over the style that you're putting forth. But the actual implementation and use and experimentation with it, and the level of depth within it, is really what's intriguing. It's a little bit more complex, right? Because you and I have both played around with this for a few hours, and I think we've got similar and different takes. And one thing's also sure, we both haven't totally figured it out, right?
No.
Because there is some of this creative aspect of how you leverage it, the use cases that you leverage it for, and maybe the ways that it can even be versatile to apply it, consistently across the board. So I don't know. Yeah, I think that was a really great way to sort of tee that up.
Yeah, man. I was trying to, when I first dove in there, I was basically like, what the hell is this? Like, oh, now I'm selecting 2 different styles. And I think it's good for everyone to know, basically, it does cost a lot of hours to do this. And this is where I was confused, and I'll be totally transparent about it. Where it's not totally transparent for beginners is that this, really works with one singular prompt. Like when you style tune, it's going to work for a singular prompt. Trying to achieve a aesthetic that will translate across all subjects, environments, things of that nature, way harder. So that's something that, I was trying to dive into right away, because I'm like, I like a specific style. I want my stuff to look like this, and I want it to be ubiquitous. I don't want it to be, I have to just add the whole prompt again and then add that style again, because the whole goal of this for me was to not have that happen. Was to just prompt a couple words, put the style parameter in, and then essentially have a full image that looks exactly how I want it every single time, which I don't think is super achievable just yet. I think we're there. I think this feature will definitely evolve, because it's going to be, I think, a big part of either, one, their marketing rollout, or 2, like, just something that they know the community is diehard on. So I would say that, again, be the first person to say it's not as easy as it looks. But, getting to that point, there's a few things that I found that work well, and also can be useful in terms of like getting real consistent imagery across the board. But yeah, I know you want to, do you want to dive into kind of the process at all, see how that, like, see what that's about? Because I know a lot of people have probably just started playing with it. Naturally, we've probably gone a little bit
Yeah.
further.
Yeah, let's
We're addicted.
let's do that. And I'm curious too, like if anybody is live on this with us right now, like go ahead and put how much time have you spent, with tuning so far? And, do you know what it is? Have you played around with it? Have you seen any successes so far? Are you struggling with anything in particular? Because that's really what we're here to tackle. I think to Rory's point, right? Like we've both shared and talked about some of the things that we've seen work really, really well so far. But again, we've also seen some things that haven't, right? And so I think it's important as a creator, somebody that's playing with the tool, to celebrate everything as a win, right? Whether you're failing or not, you're getting closer to the answer. And same thing on the other side, right? If you start to unlock things, right, you can reuse those ideas. And so, yeah, let's get into that a bit. And feel free to, like, Rory, I'm thinking maybe we even share some screens too, like just to kind of like showcase this a little bit more visually as well.
Yeah.
We're not just to be clear, we're not putting together decks for this. Rory and I have enough going on. We're not creating separate decks just for these sort of live sessions. But I think what would be helpful is to give you guys a little bit of a visual taste too, and show you some of the things that have come as a result of us playing around with it.
Yeah, I think it's good to know, right? Like basically if you're haven't done this yet and this is the first time you're going to dive into it, there's a few things to know, right? Like one, basically all you have to do is type in tune, /tune, and then add your prompt and then press enter. Essentially, it'll bring up a window that Midjourney creates. It's going to take you, it's an external link to go to a browser window. And in there, you can select from, before you do that, either 16 images, 32 images, 64, or 128, if my math is correct. Those will all be uniquely different styles. Now, what I've noticed with this is that basically I've done it probably like 15, 20 times now at this point. They all have a very similar look and feel, the styles, as they even begin to expand. So it'll be like a very distinct style set, if that makes sense. So it'll give you 4 images in one style, 4 images in another style, so on and so forth. But the fact is that there's definitely some consistency in that every single time you run a tune prompt. Now, you go to 64 options, you get a lot more. You go to 128, you're going to have a whole different library of opportunity to kind of dive into. But what I've noticed with this specifically is that if I can conceptualize this in any way, essentially the style it's a parameter, right? So it's a parameter. You add it as a parameter, -- style, and then space, and then the code that it generates for you. So my thought process in this is basically like if you wrote the prompt, let's just say it's a girl walking in the streets of New York City, nighttime, whatever. Then you added no parameters. That's probably going to be one of the sets. Now, the other sets are going to be, I think, a mixture of stylize, chaos, and weird. So one prompt set might just ubiquitously be, S200, C50, weird 3000, right? The other one might be style 100, chaos 5, weird 100. So I think that's how it's mixing it up. So you don't have to be playing with parameter sets as much. This is generally how I'm seeing it. Because again, if you mix and match those 3 parameters, stylize, chaos, weird, you're going to get completely varied grids every single time. They're going to be totally different based on that. Like the difference between style 100 and style 1000, massive. The difference between weird 1 and weird 3000, insane.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's kind of how I'm envisioning it. If I can make it digestible.
Yeah. You and I were talking about that yesterday. I think that was a really, I hadn't thought about it like that. And I think that is right, because you're going to get some really weird things that pop up. Right.
Yeah.
And so here, let me see if I can share this too and give people a little idea of what you're talking about. So
going in straight into one of the tune pages.
Yeah,
it's a good idea. Let's do that.
Okay. Rory, you can see this, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, this is what we're talking about. If you've been in here or you haven't been in here, this will just be a really good reference for what Rory's describing, right? So you're going to get these grids in a couple of different ways that you can utilize this, right? So you can compare 2 styles at a time, or you can do it more like this. So it's just a preference, right? But I've noticed if you do it like this, which I thought I liked better, then it's only going to show you one of those images out of that 4, right? So you're kind of not
Yeah.
getting to see that full grid. So play around with that. But anyway, any selection that you make, right? So I can make this selection, and this selection. That's going to create a unique style, right? See this code down here? That has changed now. All right. Now, if I change that one off, that's changed again. If I change that, it's changed again. Now, what Midjourney has said too, right, is somewhere between like 5 to 10 seems to be a really good mix. The less selections that you make, probably the more consistent and aligned it's going to be toward those selections, right? Versus the more that you add, the more of sort of the versatility of all those that are going to come into play. And it's very interesting too, right? Because Rory, you and I were talking about this, but you can actually see every element kind of infused or integrated into that image based on those selections, which I think is fascinating. I wasn't so sure that that was going to be the case. Now, what Rory's talking about too, right, with this weirdness and the stylized, like, see how different these images are. I mean, these are all over the place, right? All over the place. You know, this has sort of got a little bit of a noise or muted feel to it. This has got something that feels stylized. You've got something that feels a little bit horror driven, which seems to pop up a lot.
Always. Yeah.
Got some real dark images.
Super bright.
Yes.
Super minimal. Yeah.
So that's where this is really interesting, right? And so, you know, when you really want to, if you want to think like a math nerd, think how many combinations are possible from one given set, assuming that you like a decent enough of these, right? Like, so that's why I think if you find a really good one, these become really, really fascinating to play with.
100%. That's the thing too, is like those sets, right? Like I started with, and if everyone is just beginning, I would just start with the 16 set parameters. Like you don't, or the 16 options. You don't need to go for the 128. It's going to be too much to start with. I did it one time. I was like, I don't even, I can't even go back and forth and play with this many combinations.
It's almost overwhelming, right? And the other part of that is so let's just run through this too, and it'll tell you this, but 16, combinations, that's going to use 0.15 fast hours for you, 32.3, 64.6, and 128. What Rory's talking about is 1.2 fast hours eaten up if you run that one time, right? So
a lot,
and so if you're on that sort of that $30 plan, I think, which is what I'm on, I get 15 fast hours, right? So I'm using those very judiciously. And in fact, I think for this month specifically, my strategy is I'm saving all the fast hours for tuning. Anything else in relax mode, it ain't even that big of a hurry for me, right?
So it's because, like, again, you're gonna screw up. I screwed up a million times already. Like I've tried to go too deep, too shallow. I think that's also part of the nuance of this all, right? I think when you're looking at where you want to start, I would start and like basically do a shorter, more defined prompt, if that makes sense. Not like be very generic, like man walking in a park, and then do style tuner, because really all that's going to do, if you think about it, is just going to be man walking in a park. Now we know from prompting Midjourney, if you do something super generic, it takes a lot of creative liberty. So that could be whatever. And maybe it's man walking in a park in a certain style, at a time of day or whatnot. Give it a little bit more direction, but at the same time, super generic, because then if you think about it again, it's just going to add those different combination of parameter sets. So it's just going to be all over the place. Now, that could be good if that's what you want and you want to have options, right? But I also think if you're looking for dialed in, like beginner, that's good. Intermediate to pro, if you want to dial in a style, you really have to get very granular with the prompt selection and like what you're doing there, because then it'll start to influence, right? Because I've noticed this when I ran it once. I did my base prompt with a car, and that made everything very easy for whatever reason. When I did a base prompt with a subject of like a woman, I noticed that would like what's the word I'm looking for? Influence basically what was coming out on the other end when I would put that style parameter back in. So even if I prompted, man in a park, it would still come out as a woman. So there's different nuances to it, but I think looking at, what I've noticed is things like composition tend to be the most dialed in on Midjourney, and they also translate very well. So things that, if you want a symmetric composition where you're in the middle, if you want an asymmetric composition where you're not, if you want a side profile, like things like that for a person or a subject, that tends to translate way better than just like, a subject doing something in an environment, if that makes sense. So that's my little tidbit there of information from failing about 50 times already.
Yeah. Like that was what we were. I think that those were one of the first failures that we were running into when using it. And I'm sure anybody that has used it to this point is probably feeling the same thing. So it's almost like, what do you put in there, right, that is going to influence the style, but be versatile enough to implement and integrate across different types of prompts, right? So to your point, if I put woman or lady or girl in the prompt that is style, and then I use that code, it's going to be difficult, right, to then put a man in that prompt before it without that becoming funky or jumbled. So what are those things, right? You, I think, just started to go into it, I think, pretty well.
Yeah.
Is like composition seems to be something like that. Light seems to be something like that. Colors seem to be something like that. If you've got in the style of or something like that, where it's a material or something like that, those feel like they're versatile enough, right, to then prompt on top of it to influence that look without having mixed results, right? Is there, like, what else would you add to that? Is there anything else that you've seen?
I think like when we talk about fine tuning images, right? Like we've done and we've gone very deep into a number of different things. If you follow Drew or I, you know how deep we go on certain elements because we nerd out on this stuff. But like I tend to think that Midjourney has a very good coherence for certain prompt categories. Like composition tends to work very well whenever I add anything focused on composition. Anything lighting wise always tends to work because there's variation in it. So if I was just to say a golden retriever, you might get the same looking golden retriever every single time. But if I said, difference in golden hour backlight and, cinematic lighting, you're going to get two uniquely different image sets and emotional feels out of that. So like I tend to think with composition, lighting, those make a really big difference. But overall, I also think if you're looking for a certain style, like, I focus a lot on photorealistic stuff. I like a 35 millimeter look. I tend to think 35 millimeter translates very well on Midjourney. There's differences, of course. You can add cameras, you can do whatever you want there. But I tend to look at that as being where, so even to take a look, I'll share my screen so you can see kind of what I'm talking about here. Hopefully this doesn't crash the entire feed, but let me present here.
We've gone through worse. I think we've already gone through worse before.
Yeah, let's see if we can do this. Sharing screens. We want to do the whole thing. So here we go. Let's just everybody just hang tight.
Okay, let me add this. Okay, you're up.
I'm good. Yep. All right. So this is essentially the difference between the default and then my style, right? Basically, what I wanted to do here was I didn't want to go too far. I just wanted to influence Midjourney a bit because I have a big problem with Midjourney and how symmetrical it makes everything. Like it really upsets me for whatever reason. Don't take that the wrong way. If you like symmetrical, totally cool. It's just for me, it's too much. So everything here on the left, as you can see, is all symmetrical. Like this right here, this image of the girl walking down the street in Bosa. There's basically like a direct X right to the middle and everything bleeds into it. It's cool, but that's what Midjourney does all the time. So I'm trying to get away from that, right? Same thing here. If you draw an X, everything looks basically like it's crisscross right to the middle. Yeah. Even when you go down here, same thing. This is all the same prompt. So it's just woman walking in environment, right? With the same parameter set. Now, on the personalized style, what I wanted was essentially a asymmetric composition so that it wasn't always focused. I wanted it something to be off center, right? I wanted that 35 millimeter look. So it was a little bit granular and analog. I wanted there to be tonal balance. So that's a prompt token that I use a lot. Basically, the light and dark elements are balanced in the photo. So that you get some good shadows, you get good darkness, you get good vibrant pops of color. And, again, this is kind of what the difference was in translating it. It's the same prompt, right? Just a different style that's added to the back end of it. And now every single time I get an image that's more dynamic in my own subjective feel. Like, I don't think some people might like these more on the left. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I want something that looks like this. I want something that's off center. I want to focus more on the environment than just the subject, right? So I think that's a good way of thinking about it. Now, this translated very well for me, and I've done it across multiple styles and multiple different subjects. And do I have it up here? I don't, but I can always come back to that and show you what I mean. There's, like, specifically with that, I was very focused on getting that particular, like, construction of a photo, if that makes sense to everyone. So that's where I wanted to really take that. And then I could do a Land Rover in Cusco, Peru, and then it shows up in the same way. Or I could do a guy riding a motorcycle in Bali and it shows up in the same way. So that one for me worked. Now, that is one specific tiny use case for this, right? Like, there's not to say there's 100,000 other uses for this and different ways to play around with it. I think you've done it a little bit differently because you showed me some stuff and I was like, I didn't even think about doing it that way, because the stuff you created, I was like, I don't even know how you prompt that. Like, I couldn't even conceptualize where to come up with that. So, I mean, I'll pass it to you there, because I think that's.
Well, I mean, you said a lot of really good things. So if you're on this, there are a lot of nuggets in that. Okay, one, that symmetrical component that LinkedIn tends to favor, right? That's the beauty of sort of something like this stylized tuning, or really understanding the different words or tokens that you can use in prompts, because, it was cool at first, right? When you get a great image of somebody and they're staring right at the camera and they're right in the middle. But guess what? 99% of people can do that. Cool. Yeah. Those images no longer stand out, right? So, and of course, the other thing here is we're talking mostly photorealism. That's usually what Rory and I focus on. Let's not forget, though, that Midjourney is much larger than photorealism, right? So whatever we're talking about is just one piece of the puzzle, right? But I think going back to the symmetrical point, or the asymmetry point, is it makes the photo feel more real and candid. As a photographer, that's huge. Right. And if you're going for photorealism, having something that feels like you're there in the scene is part of storytelling. So I think that's fantastic. And then to Rory's point, right, like what he focused on there were colors, composition, maybe even some lighting, and then using that as the style that can apply to be versatile enough to cover many different areas. So I thought that was awesome. And that's I think really what we're trying to get to here, right, is creating something that's versatile enough, that you can use time and time again, because you could dial something in and it could be cool, but you're probably never going to use it again.
Yeah.
So, okay. That brings up a good point, though. Like, when do you use style tuning, right? When do you use this? So I think the things that come to mind for me are scene consistency, right? So again, bringing that consistency across the board. You brought this up too, which I think is a really good point to focus on. You can get images and unlock high quality, unique images that you just cannot prompt for.
Yep.
There are things that you can get out of using tuning that you cannot get without tuning. Okay. And maybe if you just spent countless hours playing around, to Rory's point, with parameters, with weird chaos, stylization, maybe, right? But this is really an unlock for that. And what I'm like here, like I like that we're being a little bit visual with this, because I think this sort of illustrates our point. I'll just show you guys one other thing here. Like, these were some images. These are some really good examples, right? So I was going through that example earlier with that, the picking and choosing, and these start to become very different styles and matching styles that have been created out of that, right? And so they're different looks based on the selections that I made. So, in some cases, maybe I just took one out and I changed the style, or I added one, or I swapped them, right? And so it gives you these things that you just could not get otherwise. There's
What
another
would you even prompt for that? Like if one of these like ethereal looking like apparition style, I don't even know what to start with here, even with a
yes,
color scheme or
like here I focused on the style, so I put in a color. I focused on things like, this is probably something we should talk about another time too.
the
The
core.
idea of the core
Yeah.
usage is a really good shortcut to. It's a powerful token to basically say a lot of things to Midjourney without saying a lot of things.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then, to the point, right? Lighting. So, kind of color, lighting, and maybe some other tokens, right? Get you that. But these are all from that one style tuning page, which is incredible.
Which is
It's insane, right? And so, like, that was one of the good unlocks, right? Now, there were probably, out of that one, there were probably another 7 that failed. But here's like another one, right? Like, just where it gets really interesting. Like, what would you prompt for this?
I've
What would you prompt?
no idea.
You know what I
Like,
mean? You just could not get these things outside of that. And so, again, that's another, I think, really good use case to use this. You want to achieve something that's just different. And the other thing I think is just like these become reusable, and you can share these, which I think is interesting too, right? Like I could share a tuning page with the audience here, and they could create their own version of it.
yeah.
Right? Or I could take the style code and just give them the style code. Right.
Yeah.
So there's definitely like some sharing capabilities that exist within this too.
There's another thing to hit on here with that. Like, if you want to push deeper, right? Like when we say you can't like really prompt for that, I ran some of these images through Describe just to even see if they could describe it. They pumped it out, didn't look like it. So, when you run Describe, it doesn't add the parameter set at the end. So it's basically just a blank, it's an image, or the prompt itself that the image thinks, or the generator thinks the image looks like. And then it doesn't add the parameters. But I would run some of these things through there and then hit generate, not even close. So, it is hard to prompt for because it is so much of the parameter capability of Midjourney, which is, the difference between stylized and weird and chaos. And a few other things with it too. I think in terms of how to maintain consistency between sessions, Raj, this is good. I think that's what we were, really wanting to hit on before, was it depends on what you're looking for. Because if you want consistency with a character, that's probably going to be way harder than consistency with a composition. So like a composition, again, that can entail a lot of different elements, whether that's the positioning of the photo or the type of photography or the, whatever art you're trying to do, the color scheme, everything along those lines. So this one, it's good for that. It's good for getting the style nailed down. And I found if you're looking for consistency, you want to go with less selections on that, that preference page. So instead of doing like 17 different selections, maybe do 1 or 2. Like 1 or 2 has seemed to work the best for me in translating it, because then I've been able to take that look and apply it to many different subjects and settings or whatever type of art you're trying to create. It all seems to work pretty congruently. But that's kind of just a few things that I've noticed. And also, if you're going to start with a base prompt, you can use in the base prompt itself parameters. So you can use an aspect ratio, or you can use chaos to vary your grid. Now, to me, if you're trying to find consistency, adding chaos is going to make things more inconsistent, right? Because it varies your image grid. So just think about, adding chaos to a parameter and then basically having Midjourney go and add more chaos to it when it's adding these different parameter sets. So like if you're looking for consistency, probably don't do chaos or use a very low value. If you want more options, go ahead, let it ride. You'll probably get some wild stuff. So that's another thing just to take note of. And then on the back end, we're getting granular, but that's what we're here for, right? You can only use aspect ratio, stylize, and chaos on the back end. You can't use weird on a style parameter. So when it's, -- style your code, you can't use weird on that. I personally love that parameter, but either way, it's adding it itself. So take note of that. Obviously, some of the other parameters work too. I believe tile works as well. So another thing that could be interesting for people trying to create patterns and backgrounds and things like that.
Yeah,
It's a
that's
really nice use case for it because God knows creating patterns is the most god awful thing in design ever. Like I would never wish that on anyone again. Or if you really like it, I apologize, but that kills my soul. So sorry for the long answer there, but I think there was a few things.
Hey Rory, do you have it handy maybe to pull up Discord or at least that tuning page or something just to show them how, maybe if anybody hasn't played with this, like how that sets up or looks in terms of that style code that you have to add, and then what you were just talking about with you have the limitations that exist, right, between beyond what you can use on top of the style, right?
Yeah. So, like, let me pull this up real quick. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, while you're doing that, Antonio just mentioned a trick I've seen used for character consistency is using actor celebrity mashups. Yeah, that could work, right? Depends on the project that you want to use. Character consistency, just FYI, is I think Midjourney's next big thing that's on their mind. So beyond these versions, I don't know whether that's V.3. I don't know whether that's V6. Probably V6. I don't think they've got character consistency that far along from what I'm just reading on the tea leaves, but character consistency is going to be something they solve for, right? That's definitely something that we all have in common in terms of the ways that you can get there. Rory and I talked about this last time during a live, right? Like you can achieve it in sort of this workaround way, but then it's still not perfect, right? So Midjourney has been listening to that feedback. That's probably their top priority outside of these actual versions. And I would imagine that's part of it. So
definitely. It's the biggest question. I mean, everyone wants to know, can you create it? You can do it in Stable Diffusion. You can do it somewhat in DALL-E. Like I wouldn't go ahead and say that's like the holy grail of it, but they're gonna address it. They have to, because it's just the biggest. It's the big. I can't imagine if they search through Twitter, they couldn't find 1,000 questions about that a day. How do you create consistent characters? Like it's all over the place. Every question, So that one's definitely going to be a priority. But let me pull this up real quick, and just so everyone can just have a visual of this. Let's hopefully we don't crash here. Let's entire screen, bang. Okay. And are we sharing? Whoa. Okay. Where do we go here? So in Discord window, right? Basically, like, again, you can go as deep as you want on these prompts. And then the style this is how it looks. All it is just -- style. And then the code that you were given on the preference page. Now, this one, again, I use the same code that I did for the other ones before. It's exactly what I wanted, right? Like it's just, again, same thing. I'm looking at asymmetric composition. I wanted tonal balance. I wanted, really like a 35 millimeter look. So it's everything that I wanted. Now, the other style that it generated was this one here, this 7.4 CS, whatever it is. Now, this one generated a totally different style, but like, as you can see, same prompt, totally unique style. That was not what I was looking for, but at the same time, I thought it was kind of cool. So you can link these, which I think is important, which I'm going to show you next. Now, what that means is basically you can take any style that you generate and combine it with another one. So then it'll even further mash up what you're doing. So you can have one style that is the one you really like, and then you can have an experimental style, maybe that you really like. All you have to do is connect them by like a dash right here, paste them both together, and then go ahead. You can paste more than 2, you can paste 3, you can paste 4. It all works. So I think that's important to know as we go through this, because I'll show you kind of the difference here. And basically, this was that original style that we talked about, the woman walking an Angkor Wat. This one was the one I was using in that previous example. Now, this is another one I generated, which I wanted it to be more synth wavy style, maybe a little bit more neon and a little bit more saturation going on. So I got that. This one, I was like, let me pick something super experimental in the preference page. And it came out, I, again, wouldn't know what the hell to prompt for this. So these are 3 distinctly different styles, as we can see here. Let me see if I can open this up a little bit. There we go. So here you have this one, which is kind of my base style. This one, little bit more synth wavy, saturated. This one, looks like an acid trip at this point. And then this one, I combined all three of those, and you can see there's elements of all of it, right? So we have like this interesting sort of like neon, like super saturated, dialed back look in the background. There's like a neon saturated glow on her. It still has that asymmetrical positioning. It does have the light and dark elements. So it's also got, baking in some of the second style as well. So again, I ran this through Describe. It came out not even close. But also, I would never know how to prompt for this. Like, what the hell am I? What am I writing? Like low angle asymmetric composition, temple in the background, neon, super neon saturation, like red glow. I don't even know where to start.
Attire.
Right? Like, what am I even doing? So this is where it can get really cool, is when you start to have like your own selected image sets or prompts that you really like, or your style preferences that you really like, and then linking them, because the stuff does come out cool. It comes out way different. And it's a great way for anyone in here that's marketing, anyone in here that wants to stand out on their content, anyone that wants to have just a little bit of a different look than everyone else that's posting stuff on Midjourney. This is your way to stand out and make it your own, because you're going to get more unique stuff, and it's not going to look like the generic Midjourney output, polished AI robots kind of thing. So that's me getting nerdy on what this means and how it can actually work. But where does that take us, though? Right? Like, where does that take us? Now, I think what you've done, and we've talked about this on the last one, was more like a branded stock photography library, or a branded, for different companies, businesses, whatnot. Now, this is way more achievable, like, than it was before. Like, you were just playing around with the prompts, hoping that it would kind of look exactly the same, right? Now, This is like, if I get a style dialed in, this can be the whole image set. Like, that's my whole brand look and feel. I think people are also going to start to reverse engineer what brands do. Like, you think about some of the, like, I think of like a Chick-fil-A commercial. I know exactly what it looks like. I rarely eat at Chick-fil-A, but I just know the commercials, because it's like a big bold image of like a chicken sandwich, like super clear white background, but like the red of the Chick-fil-A logo pops the hell off that. And then like the food just pops off that white background, so saturated, so crisp. So if I really wanted to go in there now and reverse engineer that, I could probably figure out exactly how to do it and then produce other shots in that style. Am I saying that's ethical? No. Am I saying for a brand, if they wanted to do that and check it out? Sure, because they can do things like that, right? That's where this is going. I think you're going to see a lot more of this happening than that's been starting. I feel like, watch somebody start to go and back engineer Wes Anderson's style, right? And then you don't have to use in the style of Wes Anderson. So like, that's gonna start to happen. I think people are gonna start to do it with art. I think people are gonna start to do it with brands. It's just gonna be a very interesting couple weeks to see where it all goes. But again, apologies for going on a little rant there, but I think that's just kind of like all what's churning in my head. I can't stop.
What we're here for, brother. That's what we're here for. I mean, we're still in these early stages of what's happening in this AI visual world that we're moving toward. I mean, I think when you really look at it, Midjourney started as, this idea that you could describe through words what you want to create that's going to show up in your screen. Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Not consistent, but it's fun. And then it became to this point where it was getting better and better. And then we had that quality jump where it became, obvious, I think, to some people, this has got utility in business now. Yeah. You can use this, right? What are the regulations? What's the legality? What do I need to think about? Because this is ready to go. And then now we're talking about almost this idea of storytelling, right? Mm-hmm. With photos and creating scenes, consistency, like, where are you trying to drive the narrative visually? And then also one thing to note too, right? As we've got about 15 minutes left, is Midjourney has talked about 3D video coming to the platform. Huge. That is massive, right? So if you think about that in the future and you look at where Midjourney's at, you can kind of start piecing some of this together. For example, right? Like, I don't know how many are familiar with this term Gaussian splatter, but this is sort of that taking place in terms of the technology that's going to be brought into the fold. Now, for those of you who have not heard that term before, I'm going to do my best. I'm not an expert. From the way I understand it, technology is able to basically recreate scenes using splattered dots, right, to form figures and shapes and sizes and so forth. And I see this as a point where we're eventually going to get to a place where you could create an image like anything that we've created. And then you will have the ability to step into the scene, right? And drag and move around the scene. So instead of prompting for, I want a side angle of so-and-so, or I want a bird's eye view or low angle, you're essentially going to have control over that entire scene that you created and get any shot that exists within that, right? Which then goes into like that video component or things that you're starting to see with Runway, where you can start to, and Runway, for those of you who don't know, is basically, a text or an image to video tool. So, a lot of people will take Midjourney images, they'll put them into Runway. Runway's technology will basically create some movement with that image. That otherwise static image will create some sort of dynamic movement. And that's why some people are starting to put together like little movie trailers or little videos. Rory did an awesome one with Nike. And so like you can see all these things coming together, and this is really democratizing creative control for anybody, right? Like movies of the future could be from someone that's living in their apartment that has put together something that is not well known, right? But is just so well done that all of a sudden they're famous, or they have the ability to put their things out to a broader world or audience. And that to me is wild when you really think about each step of the way that Midjourney and these other companies are taking to get to this future world, because like it really is mind blowing. It really is incredible.
It's nuts, man. You go, I do like to search on Twitter for the video stuff because some people do some really incredible things. I get blown away, to be honest, some of the creations on Runway, because I trend, and I'll be the first one to admit, I am not like an AI expert to the point of like where I think I'm the best or anything like that. Like I suck at Runway. Let's get real. Like it takes me forever to generate anything good, but some of these people get in there and they create magic. And it starts with Midjourney, but it starts with a vision, right? So like that's what, when you said democratized the creative aspect of it, it's so true, because again, I might never have an opportunity to go create like a mini sci-fi film because I don't have the equipment, I don't have the actors, I don't have the script writing capability, I don't have the sound equipment, I don't have anything. But again, now that opportunity is available to me, and not only just as a, I wouldn't even say as a professional piece, but just on a personal note. Like if I want to have a creative outlet, I can probably pay, $50 a month in total and just create at will with everything. So this stuff is crazy. And the 3D element, I didn't even think about that perspective, dude. Like really good. Like I did not think that it would be, okay, let me generate this image and then go into the image and then change it that way. I was thinking in a totally different mindset, but if that's the way that it works, I'm all in, because that would be so unique and so much better than what I could expect from, right now I'm thinking in terms of like very 2D Runway and Midjourney, because Runway, it's cool, but to me, it's inconsistent, and maybe I just suck at it, but I'll put in some really good stuff and I'll get really great output. I'll put in some things that are exactly the same style and like exactly the same type of composition. I'm like, I'm going to get some really good stuff. And it's like the face is morphing into like, another dimension. And I'm like, how can I spend all my time trying to just like get random results? So I think Runway is going to have some competition probably with this one. I'm sure Midjourney will like dial it up when it's ready. I don't know if they'll just release like kind of like a beta-ish version. Maybe they will. Feels like they want to have that one be a pretty big marketing point for them, but it's going to be real cool if that 3D aspect is actually kind of how you're envisioning it. Because now I just got like more excited, if that makes sense. Like more excited about it.
I'm pumped, man. And you know what I was just thinking about too? Like we make fun of like Midjourney, like they don't tell you the time or the date. That's exciting to me. Like I think about that as a marketer too, and I'm just like, like on marketing teams or something like that, you're like, hey, we need to send out this email at this time every week or whatever, so people know to expect it from us. That
It's
feels like the zig, but I'd rather be the zag where maybe people don't know when it's coming, right? Like, and when it does come, people know it's valuable, right?
yeah.
Like, it's not just a part of the routine; it stands out in the routine. So like, I don't know. It's sort of really interesting the way that Midjourney does all that and they communicate it. I'm a fan. It feels very community driven, and even though they are going to move away from Discord, I'm not sure. Like, to a large part, they absolutely will, no matter what. Will there
Mhm.
still be a part that remains? If not, they're going to have to recreate this really community driven aspect
Mhm.
within the website, because that's really the difference with Midjourney as opposed to Dolly, Stable Diffusion. Like, Midjourney actually is a very good community driven, organic, grassroots sort of effort where it feels like something you're in it with a lot of other people. And that's an intangible thing that the other ones just don't have.
It's mind blowing to me. I used to say this probably like a couple months ago. It's like I don't know if Midjourney is the worst marketing play of all time or the best. I can never tell because when they would come out with new updates, I wouldn't know if I didn't check Twitter for 4 days. Like I wouldn't know. Like I'd go on their page, it's like we just dropped Midjourney version 5. That's all they say in the cloak of darkness. But like that, exactly what you said is it keeps us on the edge of their seat. Then they don't market around it. I personally, if you guys have seen it, I haven't seen any PR. I haven't seen anything other than just grassroots UGC style stuff. So basically, they release it, let us maniacs take it, and then blast it out to the masses. And they're getting all the they're getting all of the
100%,
support, right?
100%. Like,
It's
you don't see
genius.
them putting out anything. Like,
Nothing.
I mean, even, David, the guy that's sort of created this, the mastermind behind it. I mean, he's an extremely well accomplished guy, incredible background, and he's got a Twitter account. He barely tweets.
Nothing.
He doesn't really do anything publicly.
No.
And you won't see any of their really employees that I know of anywhere on social doing anything. I mean, if anything, it's coming from Midjourney, and even that, it's not much.
So they just
Right.
got their head down working, like David's LinkedIn request for me has been sitting there for, I don't know, 3 months, 4 months. I think I've tried to like request everyone on LinkedIn like 20 times. I'm just like, will
Yeah.
someone please, I just have some questions that I want to
Yeah.
ask,
Yeah.
not in the support. I want to ask like high level stuff, trying to be like, like I'm something, like I just wanted to like interview someone, just like what it's like to work there. Because I'm just curious what goes on behind the scenes. The cloak of darkness is intriguing, but it's a great like the community aspect, super cool, man. Like a really good point. Like I think having the accessibility on their website originally to see what other people were prompting instead of having to go follow people, and like, oh, this is the person I like and their style. But just being able to see that community page and go through it and be like, whoa, there's some really wild stuff out here. People are really creative. I even, I like that element. I'll take that. I didn't think of this. So it is like a symbiotic type of relationship that I hope it doesn't become like this individual siloed sort of approach to it on the
Yeah.
website.
Yeah, I
We
agree.
didn't have that because Discord, for all of its faults and people complaining about it, I kind of like it now. Like I started using Discord for more things. I didn't really think I would be on Discord in this fashion, but because I had to use it for Midjourney,
Yeah,
then I was like,
it's
use
still
it for everything.
it's still a really good tool. It's definitely
Yeah.
got a place, and Discord is really a platform that is built with community in mind. So I think it's definitely important. Midjourney is going to have to, and I'm sure they are, right, but really dial in their approach to, I think, a couple things with the website when it's fully rolled out, right? So right now, most of you probably know this, but what you see in Midjourney with your images now is sort of phase one of their website and their UI. So right now you can just explore images, you can look at your images, but you can't prompt or anything within there. Eventually you're going to be able to prompt and generate images in there and do some other things. What other things? We don't know. Also under the cloak of darkness. But I think like a couple things stand out. So community aspect, how do you continue to drive that forward? I think organization of maybe stylized, like even these style codes, or how you can maybe organize your things in a little bit more customized way. And it's a little bit more, I guess, intuitive. Going back to the community thing, I think like making sure that you're able to even follow people in some regard, or maybe there's some other element there, right, where you can kind of follow artists and what they're creating and maybe what they want to share within their own stuff.
Shared spaces, right? Like I know that businesses do it. They have their own shared channels. I mean, I hope that still stays because I don't know what they would do without that, right? Like, Antonio mentioned a good thing, like a mobile app. I have a feeling that is coming. They've mentioned it before in the past. I'm personally a mobile. I can't type on mobile, so it's
yeah, it gets a little frustrating.
It's just annoying for me. That's just my own personal opinion. But yeah, I think the community thing, those shared channels, because they're good. I've seen how businesses utilize them. People are in there all the time. They have different project channels, right? They go in there and just rip. And everyone's seeing what everyone else is doing. So it also gives everyone else that community idea, right? When I'm thinking about operationalizing it too, that's where my head's at, because it's not just pure personal creation. Like businesses are going to use this. People are going to use it in a collaborative fashion. How do they continue that? So I hope that's a big part of it, because if they silo it, it's going to feel kind of like DALL-E. And there's nothing wrong with that. Right? There's nothing wrong with being in your own chat window, but also there's something to be said about being able to get inspiration from
just a different experience, right? And I think like from the people that use DALL-E, right? Like for maybe a majority of people, that's going to be fine. It's in the fact that OpenAI, put this multimodality into one screen. Like there's obvious benefits to that, right? Like there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's a great thing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But again, if you're sitting on this call, it's because you're seeing the different value and capability and quality that Midjourney brings into the fold, right? Like you could use other tools, but I think why we're all here is Midjourney has a different approach. They seem to always be, or have been to this point, the top of the top in terms of the quality that you can get out. And again, I think that community aspect is a real differentiator for people feeling like they're figuring out in real time as a group and not by themselves, right? So there's something to be said for that. One other thing I was just going to note, we have a couple minutes left. If you guys have any other questions, drop them in now. We'll address them. Let's see if we have anything else here. Somebody's already created a 3D scene and then used Gaussian to create the 460 scene.
It's crazy. I think there's also a lot of things that, there's things that like Stable Diffusion is doing that probably, Midjourney is going to want to bring into the mix. There's, I think you can see sort of like the inspiration in terms of where like custom styles is coming from. I think a lot of it's just going to be watered down. Like I think about it as, Photoshop, right? Or the Photoshop Canva analogy, right? Where like DALL-E is kind of like Canva, Midjourney is like Photoshop. I think really Stable Diffusion is like Photoshop, and Midjourney sits somewhere in the middle. That's kind of why it's so appealing to so many people, because you can do more than just the basics. You have more control, but also you don't have like supreme control. I feel like Stable Diffusion, but you have to be, from my understanding, limited playing around with that tool. You have to be very dialed in and know exactly what you're doing to get anything remotely good. Now, this is like the bridge of the gap, right? Like where you can kind of just prompt something, it'll come out looking good if you know what you're doing. But the DALL-E makes it as simple as possible, where it's just like, do this, great, prompt it, done, easy. So,
Rory, are you familiar with like the term MVP, minimal viable product?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think, I was actually, when I was in New York last week, there was a girl on stage, and she was a developer, and she was talking about a product person. Actually, she was talking about the difference between an MVP and what she called an MLP, a minimal lovable product, which I thought was an interesting reframe too. And I think what Midjourney, to your point, is doing is they're creating a minimal lovable product, because like it's more than an MVP, but it's something that we can hang on to, we really like, but we also understand that it's going to get better. It's going to get better.
Yeah.
They're going to build on top of it. They're going to build on top of it. So for example, like I know another part of that office hours was they've got a better upscaler now. It's just a little bit slow, right? So it's, just things like that. Right now, just to take things into perspective, again, we always say this, but it's important to mention this very moment, it's only going to get better from here.
Yeah.
Only going to get better from here. It's just a great reminder because that should excite the hell out of you.
It's already crazy. It's already crazy. It's just wild. I still can't believe that like you think about other tech, right? Like I'm not to go wax poetic about this, but the iPhone every year, it's like, okay, we got some camera updates. You can turn your picture into a GIF. Great, cool. Yeah, but this one's like, every month it's like something totally mind blowing and new that you can do, and they listen, which is the most insane thing. They probably, Discord probably is good for that too, for collecting data. They're just seeing what's going on. They have that. I don't know if anyone's tried to navigate the support channel in Discord as well for Midjourney. It's chaos. It's hilarious, but like, it's an interesting way of having support because it's live, right? Like you're in there. I had an issue, regardless of the story. I had 2 accounts running at once, and for whatever reason, they were both operating off of my Discord account. I don't know how it happened, but I had to go in that channel, and basically, it's like ground war. Like you got to get in there, you got to like make your point, you got to find out like who's actually responding to people, and then like DM them and like tag them in your post. So it's a little bit chaotic. I found it to be kind of fun because I was like, this is ridiculous what's happening here. But it was nice to get like real-time support. Like obviously a chat window would be better, but like having it in that setting where you're seeing everyone's problems, and then someone's like, how do I prompt? They're like, wrong chat window. So it was a good experience, but I hope that would be another feature too. Not to go.
You know what else I was just thinking about is whoever's in charge of Discord's growth for usership. I mean, I wouldn't want to be that person when everybody just migrates away from Discord onto the platform. I mean, go ahead and set those expectations with your boss right now.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to have to fill that gap, and that's going to be a huge drop off. But anyway, our time's up. We hope you guys, got some really, really good takeaways from this. We tried to give you everything that we could in the time allotted. Go into tuning, talk through that, the updates that are coming to Midjourney. If you guys have any other additional questions outside of this, right, just reach out to us. I had a couple people in the comments and last time asked if this is going to be recorded or viewed anywhere. Yes, you can do that in one of 2 ways. You could either go into the event on LinkedIn, which is just a little bit harder to find. If you go to your homepage on LinkedIn and to the left, there's like an events tab. Those are your most recent events. You can find it there, pixels and predictions. So you can rewatch the replay there, or we're going to upload this on YouTube as well. We're going to timestamp it. We're going to put the transcription on there, all that good stuff. So, Rory, what do you think, man? We should probably do this again, huh?
I think we're going to have a lot of stuff to talk about over the next couple of weeks. So, that we'll nerd out. I'll go down a rabbit hole, ruin my social life, as I've said in my posts. Like, thanks Midjourney, but whatever. Yeah, I'm amped about it. So it is what it is.
Love it, man. Love it. Hey, dude, good to see you as always, guys. Thanks for joining us. We enjoyed it, and we'll see you guys soon.
All right, later.